An axe came crashing through the closet door that Amelia hid behind. "This body is wearing out," her nanny, Miss Agatha, screamed. "I need yours." Amelia, crouching in the closet, could not understand what had gotten into her nanny. The woman who had raised her since she had been 8 years old was now... Oh, come on. What had gotten into her nanny? The woman who had raised her since she was 8 years old was now on her 16th birthday, terrorizing her, having suddenly turned into a monster. With a whack, the hole in the door was now big enough for Agatha to slip her hand through. And just as she was about to unlock the door, Amelia grabbed a coat hanger and scratched Agatha. Agatha screamed, and then it appeared that she seized up and with a thud fell down stone cold dead. Amelia did not come out from the closet for the longest time, but then finally she did. And as she carefully walked past Agatha, Agatha sprang to life and grabbed Amelia. That night, Amelia said to her papa, "Papa, I got trapped in the closet. The door wouldn't open, and when Agatha tried to free me, she had a heart attack and she dropped dead right there in my bedroom." The father, not knowing if this was in jest or not, said, Oh my God, Amelia, did you call the authorities?" "No, I thought it best to wait for you." Sure enough, Agatha was dead. The authorities were summoned and the body was taken away. Years later, Amelia spotted 2 trackers from her planet. Not that she was certain, but certain enough. How did they find me, she thought. She fantasized about capturing one of the trackers and forcing him to tell her all about her planet and her people and what's been going on since she fled her kingdom. "I've been hiding out on this planet for centuries," she thought to herself. "Haven't you guys given up yet? It's not enough that my parents have been killed. My half-sister has stolen the crown and now sits upon the throne that is rightfully mine. What more do you people want from me?" she screamed to herself. "She, my half-sister, has had my life while I've been on the run, always staying one step ahead of the trackers until fleeing to this planet, Earth, with its oxygen atmosphere, which is deadly to our people. And finally feeling safe after long last, I found hosts, adventures, excitements," she thought to herself, "and now it is all once again at risk." Well, thought Amelia, in 2 days Roxy, my charge, will be 16, and then with a fresh body I will make my escape from this planet. I don't know why they are still pursuing me. I would never try to take the throne back. I couldn't. I just want to live. Roxy Rose Bastan, lying upon the floor, she could not move. She was frozen where she lay, but with her eyes open she could see her nanny Amelia wearing a crown. Awfully strange, and Amelia was placing a stone upon Roxy's forehead. As Roxy breathed in, she began to feel further and further away. Just then she heard a commotion, and the house alarm went off. "Why is the house alarm turned on during the day?" Roxy thought to herself, as she saw Amelia take the crown off her head and place it down next to Roxy, and hurry off with what looked like a lightsaber in her hand. Then her father, who had been summoned home by the alarms, found Roxy in a near catatonic state. So he lifted her up and carried her to the car, and then he drove to the hospital. The hospital ran a lot of tests, but he seemed to recover. But she seemed to recover on her own. Amelia knew the weakness of the host bodies, and the trackers did not. So she held her own in the fight and even managed to jump into a car and flee with the trackers hot on her heels. Roxy was afraid that she was still in danger, so that night, a little past midnight, she placed the stone back into the crown. There were 12 stones in the crown, and she took the crown and a small shovel down to the cemetery near her house and buried the crown in a new grave that did not yet have any grass growing on it. That is how she knew it was a new grave. She read the marker on the grave, Carlo Khalidi. Then she walked away in a sort of circle and made her way back and found a spot near his grave while crouching in the shadows, and so she could watch the grave and without being seen. The next thing she knew, it was daylight. Oh! She must have dozed off, and the grave was still safe. When she got home, the police were there, and her father was worried. She told them that she must have walked in her sleep and wound up in the bushes. Her dad told the cops to forget about it, and he slipped the cops some cash and said, "Here, let me make a contribution to the police fund." "Well, thank you, Mr. Bustan. Well, we'll take care of it." Roxy felt something strange when she looked at the cops, kind of a sixth sense, a warning of danger. The next day, Roxy, while walking down the street, saw the cruiser pull up, and they got out of the cruiser and ordered her to face the wall. She did, and as she did, she saw a blue light bouncing off of the wall. They were scanning her with some type of a device. She thought. Just then, one of the cops' heads exploded, and Roxy could smell grapefruit as she turned. Dang. Let me find my place. I will make an escape. Alarm went off. Amelia knew the weakness of those bodies. Roxy was afraid. Okay, Carlo. Then she walked away in a circle. Okay. She told them that she must have walked in her sleep. This is where I left off. And woke up in some bushes. Her dad told the cops to forget about it as he slipped the cops some cash and said, "Here, let me make a contribution to the police fund." The next day, Roxy was walking down the street, and the cruiser pulled up. The cops got out of the cruiser, and they ordered her to face the wall. She did. And as she did, she saw a blue light bouncing off of the wall. They were scanning her with some type of a device. She thought. Just then, one of the cops' heads exploded, and Roxy could smell grapefruit as she turned around and saw the other cop and Amelia in a battle to the death. Amelia didn't look so good, so when Amelia and the cop fell behind the far side of the cruiser, Roxy made a run for it. The next thing Roxy knew, she was lying in an alley looking up at the sky, completely frozen, just like before. Amelia was holding a pendant that was hanging from her neck that she had taken from the cruiser, and she took a small stone from it and placed it upon Roxy's forehead, not to transfer her consciousness into Roxy, and Roxy's into hers, but simply to probe Roxy's mind for some answers. Roxy tried not to think about the grave or the name upon the grave, but the more she tried not to, the harder, the more she did so. Then Roxy heard almost a command in her mind, "Sleep." While Roxy slept, a woman came out from one of the stores that had a back door to the alley, and she threw her trash into the dumpster. She noticed Roxy's hand sticking out from the cardboard. She pulled the cardboard pieces off of Roxy, expecting to find a dead body, but she could see she was still breathing, so she sat her up as the stone on Roxy's forehead fell to the ground. Roxy slowly started to wake up, still groggy and all, but she thought she had been talking to a woman, but looking around she couldn't see anyone. She could see that she was still in the alley and half covered by pieces of cardboard and with a splitting headache, but it was all so confusing. Then the woman returned with a co-worker. "I'm fine," said Roxy. She tried to assure them, but they insisted that she come into their restaurant for a bowl of soup. She complied, but the first time their attention went elsewhere, she bolted out the door and was gone. When Roxy got home, she intended to tell her father everything and warn him of the danger. But when she saw her dad, she was struck by the same feeling, a sixth sense of danger. And as she watched her father, she noticed that he moved different. So she just went to bed. Later, her father called her down for dinner, but she said she wasn't hungry. That night, she crawled out of the bed and returned to the cemetery. She dug and dug at Carlo Collita's grave, but the crown was gone. So Roxy finally gave up and walked away in a circle. And as she crouched in the circle, in the shadows, observing the grave, she saw her father there, and he was running a blue light over the grave. And then after picking up a cyber scent, walking away with the device in his hand, leading the way. Roxy returned to the alley and found several stones, any one of which could have been the stone that Amelia had placed upon her forehead. So she collected them all. She never shared the story about the stones with anyone, but everything else about what had happened to her, she wrote down and published it in her high school newspaper, the Screaming Eagle. Because of that article and its link to an actual murder or two, the police interviewed Roxy in depth, and they finally let her go, and they promised to do everything in their power to find her father, but she knew they never would. At home, looking at the stones, Roxy thought to herself, "I don't know how, but somehow I'm going to get to the bottom of this, or else my name isn't Roxy Rose Bustan." Years later, Roxy had become a successful owner of scientist and owner of her own lab, and she took each one of these stones that she had collected that day in the alley, and made each one into a necklace that she placed around the neck of a mouse. One day she got a strange vibe from one of the mice. She knew it was looking at her. She had this sense that something wasn't right, and so she quietly pressed the button under her desk and filled the mouse cages with knockout gas. So now she knew which one was the stone. While the mouse slept, the mechanical arm removed the stone from around, snipped the necklace and removed the stone from around the cat and dropped it out, removed it from the cage. And when the mouse awoke, it was angry, frightened, and confused. Roxy held up a picture of her nanny and said to the mouse, "Are you Amelia?" And the mouse rustled. Then she said, Are you looking for Amelia?" Again the mouse rustled. This isn't getting me anywhere. But Roxy had a matrix chip in a tiny mouse hat that she had dropped into. She had the mechanical arm drop it into the cage. "Put this on. It will allow us to meet in a computer-generated virtual reality matrix, where hopefully we can talk." The mouse struggled to put on the hat. It rested its head up against the wall to put pressure on the chip as Roxy put on a pair of virtual reality glasses. Roxy saw a plant that turned its head towards her and talked. "Please, Roxy, I only want to live," said the plant. "How did you jump into the mouse?" "I was transferring my consciousness into a host when I was hit by a disruptor blast. They will think I'm dead. They will have the royal crown and the 12 stones, which is all they were really after anyways, and I will be free. Roxy, I'll no longer be pursued. Roxy saw the grave of Carlo Collida, and then the giant oak tree behind it in the virtual reality matrix. And she knew that Amelia had buried the other piece of the tracker's transfer device at the base of the oak. The mouse panicked and wiggled out of the hat and spent 5 minutes scratching at the cage. "Oh no," said Roxy, "you are not going anywhere. Ever again. I will feed you and care for you, but when you burn through this host, you are done." Roxy knew that the cage was state-of-the-art, and Amelia would never be able to scratch her way free. And sure enough, one morning there was the smell of grapefruit, and the mouse had passed away. Amelia treated the entire cage as a biohazard, and it was placed into a burn bag and incinerated. Roxy went to the big oak tree and retrieved the other piece of transfer unit. Roxy could not trust her team or anyone else with knowledge of this technology. Such knowledge could not be shared. So she worked alone in her own lab, cut off from her staff. And all of her discoveries she shared with the world through 1,000,000,000 skips in the internet in order to mask their point of origin. Free of charge to open source and all that. And her lab always seemed to be the first lab to bring products based upon this new technology to market. They denied any pre-knowledge, of course, but many people had their suspicions. Then, when she was nearly 80 and she had spent her 70s staring death in the face, she decided that the world was not yet ready for such knowledge. So she had both pieces of the transfer unit placed into a time capsule and put into the cornerstone cement block for the Center of Science and Discovery that she was sponsoring with her wealth in Tehran, Iran, the birthplace of her parents. This was going to be a mighty center of scientific discovery and development, and was dedicated to human, not national, advancement. And when she exhaled for the last time at the age of 84, she passed on with a smile.